in which a background of CIT and ECIT will be explained, overview of research, where the bigger study from which this methodology is adapted will be explained. Finally, we will conclude with implications to the field of counseling. CIT was first used during World War II in aviation psychology program of the US Army Air Forces for selecting and classifying air crews. Ever since then, it has grown beyond its original application and is now a qualitative research method whose influence is expanded into many disciplines, including counseling, nursing, psychology, education, job analysis, marketing, social work, and organizational learning. Let's now look at the distinctive features of CIT as a qualitative research method. Focus of critical incident technique is on critical events, incidents, or factors that help, promote, or detract the experience of a specific situation or event. Data collection is primarily through interviews. Data analysis is conducted by determining the frame of reference, forming categories that emerge from the data, and determining the specificity or generality of the categories. Critical incident technique comprises of 5 major steps: ascertaining the general aims of the activity to be studied, making plans and setting specifications, data collection, data analysis, data interpretation, and report on the findings. Data interpretation in critical incident technique involves 3 primary stages: determining the frame of references, forming the categories, determining the level of generality or specificity to be used in reporting the data. The enhanced critical incident technique is a qualitative research method which was derived as an improvement of the critical incident technique. The enhancements introduced to critical incident technique improved the credibility and trustworthiness of the critical incident technique research method and advanced this method beyond its original purpose of task analysis into a psychological investigative tool. It was Dr. Lee Butterfield and colleagues who made these enhancements in 2009. I actually got in touch with Dr. Butterfield and got a session on ECIT before I could use it. Dr. Butterfield explained to me the various dimensions in which a researcher could use ECIT, and that inspired me to incorporate ECIT for data collection and member checking in phenomenological research. ECIT owns its current form to the originally developed CIT method and to the work of researchers who introduced enhancements to the original CIT method. These enhancements allow ECIT to be a more credible and sound research method. The enhancements did not change the original steps of the CIT described by Flanagan, but it improved it through the incorporation of a few substantial components that now form the current ECIT method. One of the enhancements is the addition of the contextual question aimed to provide the researcher with background information prior to the collection of the critical incidents. Another enhancement is the addition of a question inquiring about wish list items aimed to provide additional information to the helping or hindering incidents. Lastly, 9 credibility checks were added to improve the trustworthiness of the study's result. As a result of these enhancements, the methodology later came to be referred as ECIT methodology. First, I aimed to explore critical incidents that happened while using complementary and alternative therapies while counselors worked with children with intellectual disabilities. Critical incidents are identified as turning points in decision making. The use of E-CIT thus helped me to identify those critical incidents or turning points that help these counselors to make decisions on whether or not to use complementary and alternative therapies along with counseling while working with children with intellectual disabilities. I think now it is time to talk about the bigger picture. The overview of the research, which included E-CIT as a data collection method. The purpose of the study was to explore and analyze counselors' perspectives towards complementary and alternative therapies in counseling when working with children who have intellectual disabilities. The study utilized a phenomenological design, wherein the phenomenon is complementary and alternative therapies. The study used a qualitative approach using interpretative phenomenology. The study explored and gained insight on counselors' perspectives towards the use of complementary and alternative therapies for children with intellectual disabilities. Qualitative studies are used to understand people's perspectives and experiences through virtue of stories and narratives. Therefore, data collected will be observations, words, stories, and documents. This study specifically looked into words in the form of interviews and critical incidents. An interpretative phenomenological method was chosen. Interpretative phenomenological analysis seeks to explore how individuals make sense of their major life experiences and is committed to the detailed study of each particular case before moving to broader claims. IPA captures lived experiences of specific people in specific situations within a social and cultural context, producing relevant findings coupled with a subjective and reflective process of interpretation. It also focuses on exploring how human beings make sense of experiences and transform these experiences into consciousness. This framework was a good fit for the current research study because it aligns with the theory of planned behavior, which is a theoretical framework selected, by providing reasons and interpretations for human behavior. The phenomenon in the proposed study being complementary and alternative therapies, the researcher used the theory of planned behavior, a well-validated decision-making model that provided an appropriate framework to understand the perspectives of counselors toward the use of complementary and alternative therapies for children with intellectual disabilities. Theory of planned behavior is a robust theory that helps researchers to predict human behavior. Adsen, in 1991, proposed the theory of planned behavior that represents a link between perspectives and behaviors. The theory operates on the basis that behavior can be deliberate and planned. The theory also suggests that the best way to predict behavior is to measure behavioral intention. As you see on the slide, according to the theory of planned behavior, human behavior is guided by three kinds of underlying beliefs: behavioral beliefs, normative beliefs, and control beliefs. Behavioral beliefs talk about the consequences of the behavior and the evaluations of these consequences. In this study, the behavioral beliefs are counselors' attitude towards complementary and alternative therapies. Normative beliefs talk about the expected norms and the efforts to adhere to these expectations. In this study, the normative beliefs are the ethical considerations of complementary and alternative therapies. Control beliefs talk about the perceived control or the ability that promotes or declines performance of the behavior. Now let's look at the research questions. The researcher had 3 research questions. The first one was, what are counselors' perspectives towards complementary and alternative therapies for children with intellectual disabilities? What implications do the perspectives of counselors towards complementary and alternative therapies in this study have for the field of counselor education? What implications do the perspectives of counselors towards complementary and alternative therapies in this study have for the support of children with intellectual disabilities? Along with ECIT, the researcher also used demographic survey, via qualitative, focus groups, and follow-up interviews. The interview had two parts. The first part was looking into general perspectives, and the second part was specifically focused on critical incidents. Part 1, General Perspectives. Initial questions of the focus group were repeated to ensure that the participants had a chance to add any missing information or if the participants wanted to share more. 4 new questions were also used based on the focus group transcriptions to further explore the general perspectives of counselors, and this was the first part of the follow-up. The researcher provided another scenario to identify the critical incidents related to normative beliefs, followed by probing questions. Similarly, the researcher provided a scenario to identify the critical incidents related to control beliefs, followed by probing questions. These scenarios were selected based on the theoretical framework, which was the theory of plant behavior in this particular research. So depending on which theory you're selecting, you can frame your scenarios and the probing questions. The next step, how ECIT was used in this research, was for ensuring credibility and validity of data using data triangulation. Qualitative research is often non-replicated and cannot be generalized because the findings are specific to the selected group. In order to ensure trustworthiness, the researcher minimized threats to credibility, transferability, dependability, and conformability by triangulating the data sources and data analysis methods. Member checking was used to gather and understand all the possible perspectives of participants because member checking is considered as an important strategy for establishing trustworthiness in qualitative research. Synthesized results of enhanced critical incident technique was used for member checking. How do we do this? For this research, the researcher tracked the emergence of new categories by member checking using the table of helpful critical incidents, hindering critical incidents, and wish list items, as suggested by Butterfield and colleagues. These tables or synthesized results of ECIT were used for member checking. The researcher tracked down the critical incident in these tables, and these were returned to the participants for ensuring credibility of data collected. So now looking at some of the strengths of ECIT. The enhanced critical incident technique gleans data from the respondent's perspective. It's explorative and theory building. It's flexible, and it enables the generation of an accurate record of events and a rich data set of first-hand experiences. So it is a very good data collection tool. Now, some of the implications that this research provided to the field of counseling, counselor education, research, and scholarship. Despite all these implications, this research also introduced ECIT into counseling research. Thank you for listening.
So that was my presentation. To explain a little more about how I use the helpful in critical incidents, hindering critical incidents, and wishful list, I can say like, from the the first part that I use for data collection from the interview questions, actually when I put it into the table, like for example, I can say one of the helpful events, critical incidents that one of my participants talked about was they used complementary and alternative therapies for children. There was a time, during the summer vacation, one of the student who was in an elementary grade was actually very motivated to use these during the summer vacation and reached back to the counselor and told them about how they started using it even when they were not in school. So that was one of the helpful critical incident actually pointed out by one of my participants, promoting her to further continue using complementary and alternative therapies for children. Example of a hindering event was lack of supervision. So one of my participants actually talked about how when the participant had to reach out to the supervisor regarding some things that happened during the, or some questions that they had during their session, and the supervisor was not able to help, or because of the lack of, I wouldn't say lack of knowledge, but a familiarity with complementary and alternative therapies. So, and the wish list was many of the participants actually coined out the critical incident as having some sort of training program in the graduate level regarding complementary and alternative therapies for while working with children and adults, especially in those that are in trauma and different other kinds of mental illness. So now it's all open for questions or comments. I don't see anything in the chat box though. As you saw in the presentation, critical incident technique could be used, ECIT could be used not only for data collection, but also data analysis. So I did not actually use, use this technique for data analysis in my research. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I do. So that is the, I see a question about whether I asked specifically about critical incidents they experienced, or you set up those in the scenarios you post. So yeah, exactly. So the questions were the probing questions with the scenarios. Just because I used the theory of plant behavior, I went with the tenets of the theory, the behavior beliefs, the control beliefs, and the normative beliefs. So I posed the scenario, and then I had probing questions. The questions were like, what are some of the challenges that you face when you're actually using these techniques with children with intellectual disabilities? So what are some of the difficulties that you have faced? So when they talk about their challenges or their things that they've benefited them, that's where I actually take out the critical incidents, and then I put it in my table, and I did member checking to make sure that me and my participants were on the same page about those incidents that they had talked about. I hope I answered the question. I would also like to add, so this was an example of how ECIT was used in phenomenology. I feel like it could be also an effective tool to be used in a grounded theory research, because the more I read about ECIT, it also helps to come up with a theory. It helps in theory building because it has actually a very strong tool to extract the perspectives of people. So I would definitely think it would work well with grounded theory research as well. Those are some things that that I can even suggest for future research.
Does anybody else have any further questions for our presenters? Okay, well, if our presenters want to stay on for questions, you're more than welcome to. I'll be here as well. I'm going to stop the recording, but we can hang out for a little while, or we can finish a little bit early.
Yeah, I'm so thankful for everyone who joined today. Especially I can see my dissertation chair was a part of this presentation, so I'm excited about that. I can also see my department chair in the presentation, in the participants list. So I'm so happy for all of you taking the time to be here at my presentation. If you have any other questions, or if you need to contact me, I had my contact info. Do you think I can show that, my contact info? Can I share my screen? Okay. So,
absolutely. If it's easier too, you could also share your info in the chat box if you're comfortable.
Yeah, let me try this, and otherwise I can. Okay, got it. Yeah, so like I said, if anybody have any questions further, or if you want me to share my interview protocol on how I did it, or any questions for even any students who are actually working on qualitative research and who would like to use ECIT, I'm more than welcome to address their questions and help them with the process. So feel free to email me or get in touch with me. I guess if nobody has any questions, maybe I can stay for as long as you want, but if you don't have any questions, you can always end the meeting.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your presentation from both of you.
Thank you.